So like I mentioned, this week is the last week of our missions conference, and I have the opportunity to share with you guys a little bit about a recent mission trip that I have taken. So I'm the speaker for this morning's missions conference. Now, normally I manuscript my sermons for a couple of reasons, and one of which is that it helps me to control the time and how long I speak for. This is a little different, so I'll keep an eye on it. But for me, missions in many parts is not just those we sent out and support, which is always great, but for me also missions is what we all are called to do. We're called to live our lives on missions. And for me, that plays out in a number of ways as the pastor here, but more recently, over the last few years, looking at our community, the community of North Plainfield. I think the high school is like 70+% of the students that are there are from Spanish-speaking homes. And when we have someone like Seth Stanford come and share about the work that he's doing in Papua New Guinea, and our expectation is if he's going to go to a remote tribe like that, our expectation for him is to learn the language so that he can better minister to the people and share the gospel message with them. And about 3 years ago, as we're looking at the community, and the Lord brought in one of the first Spanish-speaking individuals to become an official member of our church in Walter. This was about 3 years ago. Around that time, I felt the Lord saying, all right, you should have that same expectation for yourself. This is what the community that you're living in looks like. If you're going to communicate the gospel message to those around you effectively, maybe it's time for you to start learning Spanish. That's what started my whole journey of trying to learn Spanish, and it's opened up different opportunities for me. It gave us the opportunity to start a Spanish-speaking Bible study. It gave me opportunities like when new neighbors move in, oftentimes there are Spanish speakers, and Amy has graciously made cookies, and I've had the opportunity to go over and welcome the neighbors who move in with cookies and speak to them in their own language and greet them in their own language. One of my desires and goals and dreams has been to go to a Spanish-speaking country and share the gospel and just learn the culture and try to share the love of Christ. And that's what I had finally the opportunity to do at the beginning of this month with the church I grew up in, the church where I came to know the Lord, which is located in Livingston. It's called the Crossing Church. And they were going to Guatemala, to a church that they partner with there and have been for 7 or 8 years now. And they asked me if I would go along with them because they didn't have anyone on their team that spoke Spanish. Can you come and help us translate and stuff like that? I'm like, okay, this kind of fulfills one of my dreams that I've had. And so I went along with them. Now, the group that they go along with, the missions organization that they are partnered with, that helped to partner them with the church in Guatemala, is called World Orphans. So I want to talk a little bit about World Orphans, what they are, what they do, how they go about doing missions, and share with you about the mission trip that I just recently came back from, because I know inquiring minds have been wanting to know a little bit about that and what we did and what that was all about. So let's start with World Orphans. As the name suggests, they are focused on helping to reach vulnerable families. And in my opinion, it's less about building orphanages and caring for orphans in that way, and it's more, I would frame it as kind of orphan prevention. They have a nice video that I think explains a little bit of their approach, and I'll show you that now, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it.
Two pastors were walking through a jungle when they noticed that there were children helplessly floating down a river that they were walking near. They both ran down to the river, jumped in, and frantically started grabbing as many children as possible and dragging them to safety. As the chaos began to calm a bit, one of the pastors stayed in the river, helping children, while the other pastor ran upstream to see how these children were ending up in the river in the first place, and to find a way to prevent it from continuing to happen. Two pastors with a very similar heartbeat to care for children, but different approaches. Studies show that there are over 140 million orphans in the world today. 140 million. For several reasons, many of these children end up in an orphanage. Interestingly enough, studies also show that 80% of these children living in an orphanage actually have a living relative. A staggering statistic that should make us stop and ask the question, why? Why would a child be abandoned at an orphanage when there's a living relative to take care of them? Something doesn't add up. Our research has shown that the common thread that links these numbers is poverty. Desperate mothers living in poverty are daily having to choose which child gets to eat today, who gets to go to school, and who needs to work in the fields. Who will she take to an orphanage, and who will she keep at her home? It's a horrific reality that families in poverty are faced with daily. This is where the church can step in. World Orphans partners with churches to be that pastor who runs upstream. Through partnership, we help prevent these mothers from having to make these decisions. We empower families to care for their children and see them move from surviving to thriving. This is the heartbeat and mission of World Orphans. We partner churches in the U.S. with churches in developing countries and empower them to care for the vulnerable in their communities. We equip churches to step in and stop mothers before they ever get to the river. Micah 6:8 says, He has shown you what is good and what He requires: to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. Today we invite you, the church, to partner with us as we seek to worship God through humbly walking, through loving, and through preserving and empowering families.
I think that is a beautiful way to kind of sum up their approach and how they go about trying to address the orphans issue that tends to happen, how they go about doing that. This is kind of their process. This was part of a presentation that I was a part of watching while I was there. But essentially what they try to do is, first of all, identify local churches. And so their approach to missions as a whole starts with the local church. Individual believers living out and living their lives on mission. And so they identify local churches that they feel would be a good fit. And they don't just pick any church that is like, hey, we want to help out in this. They're very selective in choosing churches that are already doing the work, and churches that are already showing a heart for the vulnerable, and churches that are already putting in programs in place to help young mothers, programs in place to feed the hungry, programs in place to try to reach out and address some of these issues and demonstrate the love of Christ in many ways. Because they don't want churches to come and say, hey, we want to help in this, kind of start the work and then back out when things get hard or get difficult. They want churches that are serious. And so first they identify local churches, and then they come alongside these local churches and they provide training. Each church that is identified and begins to partner with them creates a ministry group of 4 to 8 people, essentially. And World Orphans comes alongside this ministry group who are going to be on the front lines, who are going to be doing the majority of the work, and they train them. They disciple them. They work with them. They teach them how to provide counseling, how to care for the young kids and do screenings and things of that nature. They counsel them to deal with their own traumas and to grow in their own faith so that they're better equipped to serve those in need. They try to help them become healthy disciples of Jesus Christ so they can minister from that place of health. And they really stress this a lot, this idea of being before doing, this idea of being healthy in our walk with the Lord and having our own families and our own homes strengthened before going out to help others strengthen theirs. They emphasize it so much that when we were there, they were actually talking about 3 different volunteers that recently kind of pulled back as they were going through the training, through the discipling, through the counseling, dealing with their own traumas, their own hurts, and realizing there was stuff in their own lives they needed to work on. and stuff in their own families that they needed to strengthen and get right, and diving into this ministry would negatively impact that. So they were encouraged to step back and grow more and deal with that more, so that you can come in and minister from a place of health, and minister from a place of spiritual vitality as you pour out into others. So I really appreciated that they cared so much for their team and their volunteers, and that was really, really emphasized. Once trained, these ministry groups then are the ones who do a monthly home visit to families that they identify. Each church is tasked with identifying 20 families that they feel would be a good fit for this program. And these ministry teams are the ones that do the home visits and screen the children and do Bible studies and pray with the families and help to hold them accountable. And they're responsible also to each pastor of the church provide monthly financial reports of where the funds are going, and bi-monthly reports of how the program is progressing, how the people within the program are progressing. Now they put it this way, they refer to it as home-based care, these groups that go. It says the goal of this program is to equip, inspire, and mobilize local churches to build a deeper relationship with at-risk family within their community. And relationships grow through frequent visits to families in their homes to offer prayer and Bible training, counseling, and overall encouragement to empower this holistic approach to orphan care. World Orphans and U.S. churches connect with Guatemalan churches to provide gospel-centered training and funding. So their focus is very much on what they call holistic care, and we hear that word often. I think many groups and organizations talk about holistic ministry and holistic care, and quite honestly, as I watched and witnessed them go about it, this is probably the closest to holistic care that I've ever seen, because they do truly focus on the spiritual aspect and making disciples of Christ Jesus and sharing the gospel with others and praying with and doing Bible studies with these families, and they focus on the social aspect and providing a community, often a church community, a support group for these vulnerable families. And they deal with them emotionally, providing and counseling and helping them deal with their own traumas and their own hurts and their own questions as to why is this my lot in life, and why is God not providing for me the way that I think He should provide for me, and those kind of difficult questions that they're working through. They deal with them educationally as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that, providing education and schooling for the children, for the families, even health-wise. They do like vision screening. They provide funds for families to go to the dentist, to see doctors, to do those kind of health things that they run into, and economically as well, and providing jobs and training and opportunities for the families to be able to work and restore dignity to them and doing something valuable and caring for their own family in that way. And so when we talk about holistic ministry, for me, the way they go about it is really one of the closest ways I've seen to holistic care from all the times I hear about it from different ministries. So what we went on is what they would consider a partnership trip. So we didn't go to build an orphanage or anything like that. The purpose of us going was more to deepen that connection between the partnering churches in the U.S. and the church that the Crossing Church is partnering with in Guatemala. Because for them, it's not just, we're doing this missions and we sent a missionary off and we're supporting them. No, it's a true partnership. And they do Zoom calls with them throughout the year, and they do yearly visits with this church, so they feel like they're in it together and they're partnered together trying to meet these needs. So this trip was to go and to experience the culture, to see the needs with our own eyes, to understand where the needs are and what's best to give to, how to better pray, to support and encourage the group that's there, and let them know that they're not alone and that we are walking alongside of them. The purpose was to go and be that encouragement, to learn and to grow and to build and deepen those relationships. And my role in all of that was to go and help be a translator and bridge some of the communication gap so those relationships can be deepened in the best way possible. So when we went, I saw all of this kind of play out in reality. One of the first places we went was one of their headquarters, not the main one. But as we walked in, this is what we saw. We saw some of the women sitting there at sewing machines, and this is one of the workshops they utilize to make different fabrics and make different clothes. And World Orphans provides the opportunity and a place for some of these vulnerable families and the mothers to come in and have a job and be able to learn sewing and making things. And when we were there, they had just recently learned to make jeans. And so this lady was teaching the other ladies how to make jeans and belts. And they hadn't done it before, and so we got to see some of that play out for the first time for some of them. And so having made these things, they also have a store there within the same building where people can come and purchase what these handmade crafts and these handmade Bible covers, and they do things with leather working, and they train these women in things like sewing, leather working, cooking. They teach them like basic small business principles and empower them to go off on their own and be entrepreneurs and start their own business with the skills that they've learned from World Orphans and from these groups. And for others, they can come to this place and they can make things there and sell things there, as well as there's a online store where people can purchase stuff that they've made to help support them. But it restores dignity for them. And they are able to put their hands to work and provide for their own families, and it's not just a handout that they're getting, but they're gaining training, and they're engaged in it, and they're involved in it. And they see that they can provide value, and that they are valuable. While they're doing that, the ladies come in, and they do it for about half the day. And while they're doing that, upstairs from there, they have classrooms for the kids. And they're teaching their children how to read, how to write. In Guatemala, from conversations I was having with some families, it seemed like school really went until 5th grade. And beyond that, there was no real requirements. They could go to what they called institution after that. And many of the families, even at-risk families, were like, we don't really trust the public schools. It's not a great place to put our kids. And there's private options, but they don't have the money for that. And some who are willing to trust the public schools, they just don't have the resources to allow the kids to go because they need them to be working and to help provide for the needs that they're lacking. And so World Orphans comes alongside them while the moms are able to work and bring in some finances for the family. The kids get to be trained and learn to read and write and be in school. Above that, and they have like a little play section for them. Now, pretty much all the roofs in Guatemala are flat. Here, it's always angled because we worry about snow piling up and caving in on us. They don't have snow there in Guatemala, and so all the roofs are flat, and you can use that for different things. So they use theirs for like a play area for the kids. That girl sitting down and sharing with us, her name was Ruth. Just the passion she had for reaching at-risk families, for bringing Christ into the lives of those who didn't know him and hope into their lives was just incredible. I mean, this girl could barely talk about the program, pray about the partnership these two churches have, or talk about the women that she's directly involved in without breaking down in tears. Her passion for the work and her passion for people was just inspiring and infectious all at once. And from there, we went to another location. Now, this was their main office, and this was in Zone 18 in Guatemala City. Before I went, I was trying to prepare myself so I could be a good translator for them. And so I was taking some online tutoring Spanish classes, specifically with someone from Guatemala, so I can understand a bit more about the culture, some of the phrases and words they may use that's different from other countries that I've been learning from, and asking questions about what to expect when I'm in Guatemala. I told her I'm going to Guatemala City, and she named about 4 zones that I probably should avoid when I go. Zone 18 was on her list, and she was explaining the poverty there, and the crime there, the gangs there, the risk of kidnapping there, and all these things. And most of our time was spent in Zone 18. And this facility was in Zone 18 as well. This is their main headquarters. We went in, and this is where they have their team meetings, and this is also, as we go in, another workshop area for them. And we saw other ladies in there. These ones were doing more leather working and they're making leather Bible covers, as well as leather bookmarks and things of that nature that they can also then sell on the World Orphans store to, again, provide for their families. Different offices were there, including rooms like this, where they do their counseling. And for the mothers, and this was a room where they counsel the kids. And they help the kids deal with why dad's not around, or why mom's not around and we're being raised by grandma, why they're in jail, or why our lives are the way that they are. And they help to walk with the kids through their struggles, through their difficulties, and counsel them, minister to them as well. And they do the same with the mothers, with the families. One of the areas they saw was a lack for the ministry, as holistic of an approach as they have. One of the groups kind of falling through the cracks they found was teenage boys. Not terribly surprising. I feel like it's the same thing that happens here as well. We're often focused on ministering to those that we view as the most vulnerable, rightly, and that's often mothers and young children, and young boys tend to kind of fall through the cracks of the ministry. And they saw, the young kids stick around with the moms. And the moms, they're being cared for, but once they hit teenage years, the pull of the gangs is really strong. Their sense of feeling out of place and, what do we do in this is lacking. And so they recently, within a month of us visiting, had started this wood shop ministry for them. Another church that's within this World Orphans network. This pastor back here is heading it up. And they just bring the guys in and teach them how to build things, how to put their hands to work, how to make chairs and tables and things of that nature, that they can then utilize that skill and to make their own things and sell their own things and contribute to caring for their families. One family that I met, it was a grandmother raising 4 kids. 2 of them were twin boys, 15 years old. And in talking with them, it's like, what, do you guys go to school? No. And so what are you doing? Well, we just kind of stay home. We don't do much. And programs like this was made for young boys like that to regain a sense of worth and contribute to helping the family as a whole. Afterwards, we had lunch together, and the family on your right there, the guy down at the end is a pastor of another church, and he's the one that started the leatherworking ministry, and that began in his church. He's a leather worker. He's the one that trained the first group, and his daughter at the bottom, she's the one that runs that for World Orphans and leads that for the ladies who are making the Bible covers and the belts and the bookmarks and things of that nature with leather, the satchels and computer bags out of leather, all of that. So the daughter there is the one heading that up, and the man further in is the pastor who kind of started all that up. And then next to me is one of the deacons from the Crossing Church, Justin, and behind me is Jose. He was from World Orphans. He went with us everywhere. Awesome guy. Love for the Lord that's amazing, and a love for people as well. The next day we went to the church that the Crossing is actually partnered with, called Monte Alto, and inside is absolutely beautiful. I love the floor that they have there. It's just an absolutely beautiful inside, and the Crossing had a lot to do with helping and contributing for that to be built, and most recently contributed to helping them build on their roof. Like I said, it's always flat, so it could be utilized, but they gave to build it up more into a room, because the pastor is like, we have our services, and like the church that rents from us here, they have several services throughout the week, and he would say, we're having our services, and we see just the kids just playing in the street, and we want them here. We want to be able to minister to them. And so they want to use this area kind of as a youth room for different ministry things. It had just been finished built about 2 weeks before we got there, and they hadn't used it for anything. They wanted the Crossing to come and to consecrate it and to pray over it, to see it first before they utilized it for anything ministry-wise. So we got to do that. And as beautiful as the inside of the church looks, and as nice as this roof area now was, if you look just over that, you see where they live. and what they're ministering to, and the poverty that exists, the rusted tin roofs, and in the distance, the crumbling buildings that people live in. You see the struggle and the hurt, even in the faces of people you pass on the street. As we were driving from one location to another, to this church, we crossed the bridge. And this bridge on either side, it's mountainous everywhere in Guatemala. It was way more mountains than I expected, and houses just built down the mountains into a filthy ravine and a little river that flowed in. But at that bottom picture in the bottom right, that cluster of white that you see is all garbage that just goes straight down into it, and people live there and in that. As we drove by, one of the things I was shocked by was how separated everything was. It was in this zone, in zone 18 at least, it was all like gated communities, and beyond the gates, it's just more gates. And everything is closed off. Everything is really for their protection, locked up, and there's barbed wires all over the place. And for houses that couldn't afford barbed wires, people would use broken glass affixed to the corners of their roof to keep others from getting in. It's hard to imagine living like that, with that lack of security, with windows barred. The next day we went to spend some time with the ministry team from Monte Alto and some of the staff from World Orphans. Just great time to sit and to talk and to hear their stories and hear how the ministry is going, the sacrifices they make, some of the difficulties that they are experiencing. A great time to sit and to pray with them, to learn more about them, to deepen those relationships. We played some games. One game that we played had us do different activities with a certain limitation. And so I was with my friend here, and our legs were strapped together, or making puzzles with hands strapped together, or drawing pictures and getting your group to guess what you're drawing, but you were blindfolded. And all of this was to kind of illustrate the reality that we are limited in and of ourselves, and that we do have our own limitations, we do have our own struggles, but by God's grace and help, we're able to overcome those limitations. And moreover, with the help of others who partner with us, who come alongside of us, who support us, we're able to do above and beyond what we think we can do on our own. So I love that. I thought that was a great games to play illustration for us. We also, within the circle, played different games to learn each other. And one of the questions that was asked, which to me was kind of an innocent question, was, what's your dream? Simple question, right? What's your dream? I didn't think much of it. We went around and we answered, and to hear people talk about their dreams, to hear them, and most of it was about their families, the health of their family, the care for their family, and getting out of the poverty that they have, being used by God to impact families. And it was only later when talking to the families who are being impacted by the ministry and hearing their perspective of their lives. They don't dream. It's like they don't have time to dream. On the last day, we went to Antigua, Guatemala, kind of the tourist area. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And to talk with these families and to hear that they live like less than an hour away and they never go there. They've never been there. Some of them, they don't feel like they deserve to go there, like it's too good for them. Like this is our lot in life. It reminded me of when I was a youth pastor in Trenton. And we took the kids to the beach kind of as a youth group trip, and just driving to the beach to hear some of these kids in Trenton talk about, we've never been to the beach before. Like you're 35 minutes away, but their focus is different. Their day-to-day is a different kind of struggle, and it's even amplified here in Guatemala. Pastor Tim was sharing with the church about where he is in life, about the passing of his wife last year from brain cancer, about his upcoming retirement, and to watch them come around him and pray for him reminded me of that connection, that partnership, that love from one to another, that no, we're in this ministry together. It's not just a missions out there that we send money to every once in a while, but we're partnered together and walking together through this. Sunday, we went to church at Monte Alto, and in that same area we were in, this roof part, Now, all the families of the church that are being ministered to were invited to come, and we just had lunch with them. And we just talked with them and shared our lives together, and it was a bounce house, and piñatas came out, and it became just a wonderful, we got time to play with the kids and interact with the families, and we were each put at different tables to talk, and this is where I met the grandmother raising the four kids, and the reason she's doing that is because mom and dad were both in jail. Sounded like dad would be there for life. And it was just her, these two teenage boys and younger kids that she was raising on her own, selling her wares on the streets to make money and try to provide for them. And we heard stories of people who lost loved ones recently, the struggles that they were going through. To hear a woman was there with two twin children, and one younger one was probably more like 4 years old, two that were like 2 years old. And they live about 40 minutes away from the church, but they walked there. They walked the entire way there for this event. The two twins were sick too. And then to know they would have to walk back home, but that's how much they valued the community. That's how much they desired to be together. And we heard story after story of people who would go to extreme lengths just to be in church together. Too often, we don't see that as much here. But there's a desire for community. There's a realization of their need. After playing with the kids up there for a while, we had our church service, and the kids came out and they sang this beautiful song about we have Jesus in our house and we're so happy, and it was just touching to see them. But after them, all the mothers came up and they sang for us. And they sang the song we sing at times, The Goodness of God. And this is what finally broke me. This is what had me in absolute tears the entire time they were singing. Because I had just finished hearing their stories. I just finished hearing the brokenness in their own lives, in their own hearts. I just finished hearing about their poverty and their struggles and their difficulties. And to see these ladies lined up in front of the church singing about the goodness of God, and all my life you have been faithful, all my life you've been so good, just absolutely tore at my heart to see how God was working in their lives. To see how faithful he still was, even in their struggles. To see their recognition of it, their gratitude for it. To see how lives can be transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. When the church actually does what the church is supposed to do. And steps out beyond the walls and reaches out to the vulnerable and to the needy. And make Christ known, show Christ to those around them. And then when they were finished singing, they invited our group to come up and sing the same song, but in English, without any preparation, and that was an absolute disaster and quite humbling. But after they were done with that, my pastor had the opportunity to preach that morning and share the word of God with them, and I got to translate that message for him. This was the hardest thing for me. I mean, it's only been 3 years since I've been studying Spanish, and so I had it the night before, his manuscript, and spent all night working on that. Was probably running on 2 hours of sleep this day, but for me, it's serious to stand before a congregation and speak the word of God, and I knew that they didn't understand a word he was saying. If they were going to get the message, I needed to do the best job that I could, and by God's grace, I feel like I did the best that I could, but that brought it full circle for me, from starting to learn Spanish to fulfilling one of my dreams of going to a Spanish-speaking nation and presenting the gospel message. And so I was very, very grateful for that moment. And it was a great group. We said goodbye to and were pleased to get to know. And at the end, like I said, we spent our time in Antigua, and it was a beautiful city, and we came home. But for me, it was a reminder of several things, of the fact that missions is not just what others do, it's what we do. We need to live our lives on mission, reaching out to others around us. When we talk about this mission that's happening, it's people within the church. It's these ministry groups that were formed within the church that are reaching out to families around them. It was a reminder that missions is most effectively done through the local church. It's a reason why groups like Ethnos 360 focuses on having a church for every nation, right? The church is the body of Christ. We're his hands and feet, his mouthpiece. We're supposed to be reaching out to those around us. And it was a reminder for me that missions is most effectively done when it's done in partnership. Like, as I went through some of these photos and talked about it, it's like, and this pastor from this church was doing the leatherworking. This pastor from this church, his group was leading the cooking or teaching the sewing class or doing the woodworking shop. And it's different churches all partnered together to accomplish this one mission. It's churches there in Guatemala partnering with churches in the United States to accomplish this one mission. It's a reminder that it's not just praying for and financially supporting, it's also really partnering, and I loved that model that they utilized. It reminded me of Paul in our devotions as a family. Right now we're going through the book of Philippians, and last night we just read about Epaphroditus, who the church in Philippi sent to Paul. They were partnered with him, sent someone there to support him, to take care of his needs, to be with him in the mission. That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to be on mission as a local church, to partner with others to accomplish this great commission that Christ has given us. And so that was my trip. I'm grateful for you guys giving me the opportunity to go. I'm grateful to God for being able to come full circle with beginning to learn Spanish. And I look forward to seeing how he continues to utilize me in that capacity, utilize us as a church as we try to reach out to those even around us and find other churches we can partner with, more than just, the sunrise service, but other things we might be able to do together and to meet the needs in the community we live in and to make Christ known. So thank you guys for that opportunity.